We're going to move now to another interview, an interview with a person who is totally different from Nicodemus. The person called the woman of Samaria, or the woman at the well, in John chapter 4. Now, this encounter that Jesus has with this woman is important for many, many, many different reasons. And we're going to take some time on it. We'll take at least 2 sessions on it. We might take 3 sessions on it. It's so important. Let me give you 3 reasons it's so important. One reason it's so important is because it's a model of evangelism. We are taught in this passage one way to share our faith. And we'll talk more about the way Jesus teaches us to share our faith later. For instance, when we talk about the encounter with the rich young ruler, we really learn a lot about how we should share our faith in that encounter. But we also learn much from John 4 in the encounter with the woman at the well. A second reason that it's important is because it's a model of the way we should treat people who are our national enemies, people whom we don't get along with, people whom we don't like because they're different from us, because we disagree with them, because we have a historical quarrel with them, because we have bad history with them. How should we treat those people? How should we relate to those people? What should we do with those people? John 4 is also very important for a different reason. It's important for the sake of apologetics. Apologetics is the defense of our faith. Apologetics is the way we answer those unbelievers who say that Christianity is not true. The claims that Christianity makes are bogus and false. These events which are being reported didn't happen. They are made up. It's mythology. We are commanded in 1 Peter to be ready to have an answer for people like that. We should know how to press the truth claims of Christianity upon people who are attacking our faith. And I want to tell you, John chapter 4 gives us a lot of ammunition. John chapter 4 is a tremendous weapon. I will make a very, very extravagant, very bold claim. And I'll try to back it up before we're done studying this chapter. I would say that if the only thing we had was John chapter 4, if we didn't have anything else, and if we knew is all we need to know about the relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans in the first century, that we could prove beyond any reasonable doubt that there's one God who made heaven and earth, and that Jesus of Nazareth is His only Son. If we only had John 4. That's how powerful the apologetic of John 4 is. And I'll show you what I mean by that as we work through the passage. Now, the Gospels, as we're talking about these encounters with Christ, the Gospels provide us with all these different people that Jesus meets. We learn who they are, we learn what they do, we learn what their spiritual problem is, we learn the way Jesus relates to their problems, the way He deals with their problems, the way He answers their question, the way He approaches them and introduces the subject of God and being right with God and knowing God personally with them, believing in Him, His mission, what He came to do. And we can be sure that Jesus encountered hundreds of other people whom we're not told about. So the Holy Spirit, through His sovereignty, has selected certain representative people. By representative, I don't mean that they're not real. They are real. These were real people, and these were real events that really took place during Jesus' lifetime in the first century. But they're representative in so far as they represent certain kinds of people. In our last study, we met a certain kind of person. He was a very eminent person. He was a very important person. He was a person who mattered politically. When you think about the fact that he could get an interview with the Roman governor immediately, Jesus dies and there's Nicodemus right in front of Pilate saying, Joseph of Arimathea and I would like to take charge of the body. Well, I mean, you know, how quickly could you get in to see the governor? How quickly could you get in to see the president? Not just anybody can do that. So he was a person that you might call up and in. He had every advantage, every good connection spiritually, religiously, politically. He was a power broker. He was an important person in Israel. And we see the way Jesus handled him. Later we'll talk about Jesus' encounter with the tax collector called Zacchaeus. We could say that he was a man who was up and out. He was literally up. He was up in a tree. But by up, I mean he was rich. But he wasn't up and in because he wasn't well accepted. He was hated. He was up because he was rich, but he was out. People hated him. Jesus treated him in a certain way. This woman we meet today is down and out. She's the lowest of the low. We'll talk about that. We'll probably never get as high as Nicodemus. Hopefully we'll never fall as low as this woman. So Jesus ministers on the margins, and the upward margins and the downward margins, on the boundaries and the borders of the highest and lowest and those who are in between. We're probably somewhere in between. But he also encounters people like us too. But here we go from the highest to the lowest. Now, I'm sure you probably know something about the relationship that the Jews had with the Samaritans. There were two great cataclysmic, catastrophic events in Israel's history between the time that they settled in Canaan and the time that Jesus was born. One was the Assyrian invasion and exile. This took place in 722 AD. And it involved the northern 10 tribes. In 586 AD, the southern 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were conquered by Babylon. And they were deported and taken away to Babylon. In 516, am I saying AD? BC, 722 BC, 586 BC. In 516 BC, the Jews began to return to the land. Now, after the Jews began to come back into the land, there were those who'd been left in the land who had intermarried with Gentiles. And most of those people were concentrated in that region between Judea in the south and Galilee in the north, which was known as Samaria. As a matter of fact, the intermarriage was so frequent and so great that the Jews determined that these people really aren't Jews anymore. They're racially compromised, and we can't treat them like Jews. So they were shut out and excluded from temple worship. Well, they wanted to worship the God of their fathers, whether they were racially compromised or not. So they evolved their own system of worship in Samaria. They actually built a temple. But 100 years or so before Jesus met this woman at this well in John chapter 4, a Jewish raiding party under a man called John Hyrcanus rode north into Samaria and burned their temple down. So basically what the Jews were saying was, not only are we not going to let you worship in Jerusalem at our temple, we're not going to let you worship at your temple in Samaria. When a Jew traveled from Jerusalem to Galilee, The most direct route was through Samaria, but the Jews didn't go through Samaria. They went way out of their way and walked a much longer time and put themselves to much greater trouble by crossing over to the east bank of the Jordan River, then traveling north until they passed Syria. Then when they got far enough north that they were past Syria, they would cross back over to the west bank of the Jordan River. Now they're in Galilee, and they didn't go through Samaria. They took a lot longer time to get there, but at least they avoided Samaria. Why was that important? Well, because if the shadow of a Samaritan passed over a Jew, he was considered unclean. He had to go take ritual baths to purify himself because he'd come in contact with a Samaritan. Okay? So that's the background. And that's why it's so shocking when we get to John chapter 4, verse 4, that the scripture says that he, meaning Jesus, had to pass through Samaria. Wow. You say, what's the big deal about that? Jews don't do that. You don't go through Samaria. No. You don't do that. But he did. He's different. He's counterintuitive. He comes to the place called Sychar. He actually came to the place where Jacob's well was, and he was tired. And he waited by the well while his disciples went into town. And it says that it was about the 6th hour. Okay, it's 12 noon. It's lunchtime. The disciples have gone to get something to eat. Jesus is waiting alone by the well. I mentioned in the last session Spurgeon. There's a great sermon by Spurgeon about Jesus sitting next to the well. And basically he's talking about what the incarnation means. What it means for God to become man, to really become man, to enter our history, to become a real human, and to localize deity in a human body, and to think that if you went to Samaria that day, if you went to Jacob's well, you could see God sitting there by the well, tired, mind-blowing. And Spurgeon, as a master preacher, paints a powerful picture of Jesus beside the well. He's waiting by the well. It's 12 o'clock, and then it says a woman of Samaria came to get water, and Jesus spoke to her. Now, already there are two big rules that are broken. First, there are 3 rules. First, he went through Samaria. Secondly, he stopped in Samaria and he waited. And thirdly, he spoke not only to a Samaritan, but to a Samaritan woman. There's almost no way we can imagine how unacceptable that was. It would be like one of our men walking into the park and walking up to a woman on a park bench and to begin to kiss her. It was at least that shocking. At least. You simply did not talk to a Samaritan woman. You didn't do that. Not only did he talk to her, he didn't say, "How are you doing?" He didn't say, "Good day." He didn't say, "God bless you." He didn't say, "I hope your day is going well." He asked her to do him a favor. Now, think of this. If the shadow of a Samaritan fell upon a Jew, he was unclean. They hated each other. What did he say to her? "Can I put my mouth where you put your mouth? Can I have a drink out of your vessel?" Mind-blowing. Unbelievable.
We invite you to participate in the International Bible Teaching and Gospel Sharing Project. Whether these Christian expanded educational opportunities will become available to people around the world depends on all of us. We very much need and appreciate your prayer and financial support. For more information, please visit tvsseminary.com.
Let's talk about evangelism for a moment. I said that we learn a lot about evangelism. The first thing we got to do is we got to go where lost people are. We got to go find them. The second thing we have to do is we have to initiate. We have to get it started. But there's a third thing here. I don't know how it is in your country. In my country, we bend over backwards to do things for unbelievers. And I was a pastor for almost 8 years on the seacoast of North Carolina. And I had a good friend. And I didn't make very much money, but this young man worked for the county, and he made less money than I did. I know how much he made because his salary was published in the newspaper, in the local newspaper. Plus, he told me. And my last week there, we went to lunch at Western Sizzlin Steakhouse. He met me there in his car. And when we were walking to the parking lot after lunch, and this was goodbye, I was moving to Germany. When we were walking to the car, he was crying. He was taller than me. He played college football. He's 3 years younger than me, a great athlete. Very manly. He was crying. I knew he was crying because I was leaving. That's what I thought. I thought he was crying because he was sad because he wasn't going to see me again. But even though I thought that, I wanted to hear him say it. So I said, David, why are you crying? He didn't say what I thought he was going to say. I thought he was going to say, because I'm not going to see you for years or because you're going to live across the world. That's what I thought he was going to say. He didn't say that. Here's what he said. He said, I'm crying because I've known you for 7 years, and this is the first time you've ever let me pay for lunch. Think about that. That shocked me, that convicted me, that humbled me. Because here's what he was saying. He was saying, this is the first time you've ever acted like I had something to offer you. This is the first time you've ever acted like I was worthy enough and important enough to minister to you. Now, here's the Son of God. And here's this Samaritan woman. How does he begin the conversation? How does he begin the relationship? He allows her to do something for him. Amazing. He does the exact same thing with Zacchaeus. Here's this man that nobody will eat with. Jesus says, hey, why don't we go to your house? We'll have something to eat. You buy. Amazing. Amazing. We need to learn from that. We need to let unbelievers do something for us sometime. That's what Jesus did. We need to treat them like human beings who have something to offer, who have something to contribute to us, that we're not the high and mighty Christians and they just need to receive what we have to offer because they don't have anything to offer. Well, they're human beings too. God made them too. They're also made in God's image. You see what I mean by counterintuitive? Jesus does just the opposite. And when we talk about apologetic value, there's no way that could have been made up because it wasn't a cool thing. It wasn't a good thing to make up. It wasn't something they liked. It wasn't something that would have appealed to the Jews. The Jews read that, oh yeah, I want to become a Christian because this is what Christians do. They talk to Samaritans. They ask Samaritans for water. That's great. I want to be like that. No. They would say, that's awful. So they would have never made that up. because it was the opposite of what would have attracted a Jew. Then why did they report it? Because it's what happened, because that's what he did. They're not making things up. They're just telling everybody what he did. They're shocked by what he did too. We'll see that at the end of the passage when they come back and see what he's doing. Now, we don't usually talk about this at church because it's a little bit embarrassing. You know, we go to movies or we watch TV and everything is about sex. Our children go to school, we move in the marketplace, we see the magazine covers, everything is about sex. We listen to music and everything is about sex. But we don't talk about sex at church because we're at church. Well, you know what? We need to talk about sex at church because we need to get God's point of view about the thing that everybody else is talking about. And so our children will understand that, well, you know, we sometimes talk about real life at church. It's not always artificial, and we don't pretend that these big things never exist. So I'm just going to say this right now. It's kind of hard to teach this from a pulpit at church. But when he spoke to her in a very personal way, and he asked to share her cup or whatever it was she was drawing the water with, in her mind, with her experience, in her thought world, that can only mean one thing. There's only one explanation for that, as far as she knows, in her experience. So she asks him a question that she thinks that she knows the answer to. She says to him in verse 9, "Why are you, a Jewish man, asking me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? You know that's not done. Why are you doing that?" You know what? She thinks she knows why he's doing it. Of course she knows. She knows about men. She's had a lot of experience with men. They're alone. Nobody's around. He begins to speak with her in a personal way. He asks her to do something that only people who are on close terms would do. You don't share a drink with somebody, with just anybody. What could his motive possibly be? Well, there's only one answer. In her world, there's only one answer. But he's from a different world. And we're going to see later how he proves what his true motives are in a way that shocks her. But this is the way it begins. And basically she says, "What are you doing talking to me like that? What is this about? Why are you asking me for something to drink? Come on. What's going on here?" You see, because she has stereotyped him. You're a man. I know what men are. You're a Jew. I know what Jews are. I know what Jews think of Samaritans. I know that you hate us. I know what men want from women. I know what Jews think about Samaritans. Come on. Why are you talking to me like that? You see what's happening? You see the dynamic. She falls into stereotypes. Do you know that the world, the unbelievers, put us in stereotypes? They say we're stupid. We're superstitious. We believe fairy tales. We believe in demons. We're hypocritical. We pretend to be pure and moral when we're just as immoral as anybody else. That's what the world thinks about us. The greatest novelist in English literature was a pastor's daughter named Jane Austen. Her greatest novel was a book called Pride and Prejudice. In Pride and Prejudice, there is the greatest fool in English literature. His name is Mr. Collins. Do you know what his job was? His job was my job. He was a pastor. He was a minister. See, that was the stereotype. This stupid, hypocritical fool. That's what the world thinks. That's the way they look at us. And she stereotyped Jesus. She had him stereotyped as a male. She had him stereotyped as a Jew. You know what? Jesus didn't fit her stereotypes. And the more we become like Jesus, the less we will fit the stereotypes, the negative stereotypes that the world has for us. Now, what was she really saying to him when she said, "What are you doing, a Jewish man, talking to me like that, asking me for a drink?" She said that because she thought she knew him. And he knew her thoughts. He knew that she thought she knew him. So what does he say to her in verse 10? If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, "Give me a drink," you would have asked him. He says to her, "You know what, if you really knew me, if you really knew what my motives were, you'd ask me for a drink. You would have begun the conversation. You would have spoken in a friendly way to me if you really knew me. You think you know me. If you did know me, this conversation would have started out in a different way. And if you knew the gift of God." When we begin an evangelistic conversation, we need to think about what we say first. We can say, "Have you ever heard of the 4 spiritual laws?" We can say, "If you were to die right now and appear at the door of heaven and God were to ask you why he should let you into his heaven, what would you tell him?" Or we could say, "May I ask you a question?" There are many ways to begin. I always begin the same way. I always begin by saying, "Can you speak English?" But there are many different ways to begin. And there are many different ways to continue. But one thing has to be the same if we're going to share the gospel. We have to tell them that salvation is a gift. We have to show them that they can't earn it. They can't deserve it, that it's a gift. If you knew the gift, if you knew it was a gift, if you knew who was offering you the gift, that's the way he begins. And this is the way we end this lesson. Okay.